They were interested in not allowing people to become citizens, but it wasn't on the basis of race. It was actually on the basis of no allegiance to the United States, which that would make sense. When we see mass amounts of immigrants coming into the United States, the question therein lies, how many of these people are actually willing to give an allegiance to the United States? Are they just here for money? Are they just here for just a better life? Or do they love this country?
When you say Harris, nobody knows who the hell you're talking about. Yeah? No, nobody has any idea. Harris. Hey, where's Harris? They know Kamala. They know Kambabla. That was the nickname I used for a while, but I don't use it anymore because everyone thought I was just mispronouncing her name. I wasn't. Kambabla.
Mass deportation seemed to be one of the pivotal points that the Republicans ran their party on. We got to get the immigrants out of here. There's way too many immigrants that have been let into the United States. And now there's a question at hand. Does the 14th Amendment actually protect those who have been born here? Not those who have come here maybe illegally, but what about their children? Or what about the people who were born in the last 2-3 years? Are they protected by the United States 14th Amendment? Welcome to CozyCorner TV, ladies and gentlemen. I am your host, Kieran Smith, call me Q, and we are on the corner, ladies and gentlemen. We're on the corner with the Rising. Robbie Sov and all of them are here, and they've covered, again, another wonderful topic, the 14th Amendment and birthright. And this has a lot of people in an uproar. It has a lot of people, some shaken, some angry, mixed emotions. You know, you had your group of people that were like, yeah, mass deportation, get the immigrants out. And now you have some people that are like, well, wait a minute, if they were already born here, you can't really like mess with them. That's not right. So, a legal fellow, Amy Swearer, she's from the Heritage Foundation. She kind of gives her input on what the 14th Amendment does protect and like what it was actually put in place for to begin with. And then she kind of goes from there as to why some of these people may actually be protected and some are not. So we're going to jump in here with the Rising. Robbie does a great job at covering these things. Shout out to you, Robbie. You did a great job once again. And let's listen in on this, on, you know, what Robbie and Amy have to say about some of this.
22 states are now suing the government over President Trump's decision to end birthright citizenship.
Birthright citizenship is the idea that children born in America whose parents are undocumented immigrants automatically gain citizenship.
Birthright citizenship defenders tend to point to the 14th Amendment of the Constitution.
The specific clause often cited within that amendment reads, all persons born or naturalized in the United States and subject to the jurisdiction thereof are citizens of the United States and of the state wherein they reside. Senior legal fellow at the Heritage Foundation, Amy Swearer, however, disagrees with the notion entirely.
Swearer, in the abstract and Rossetti 5-page paper on the topic, writes, while it is indeed clear that the Constitution recognizes that citizenship is the birthright of certain U.S.-born individuals, both textualist and originalist analyses of the citizenship clause substantially undermine assertions that birthright citizenship must be applied universally to all persons born on U.S. soil, regardless of the immigration status of their parents. Joining us now to dive deeper into her point of view is Amy Swearer. Amy, welcome to Rising.
Hey, thank you so much for having me.
So why don't you elaborate on your argument? You know, for years we've heard that it's pretty unambiguous that that even if you come to the country illegally, if you give birth here, your children are American citizens from birth. But you say it's more complicated than that. Can you explain why?
Absolutely. So I'm fully aware that many Americans today, and in fact probably most legal scholars, simply assume that we have what I refer to as universal birthright citizenship, that we follow sort of the old English common law that universally grants citizenship to anyone born in this country under any circumstances, except for maybe the children of like foreign ministers, foreign ambassadors, etc. But the reality is, when you look at the original public meaning of the 14th Amendment, when you look at what these words meant to the people who drafted and ratified that amendment to the Constitution, they were very clear. While they were trying, of course, to override the Dred Scott decision and make citizens of the newly freed slaves, that the Supreme Court and Dred Scott said they're not citizens, they can never be citizens, even though they owe their allegiance nowhere else. Congress was absolutely trying to make citizens of them and to eliminate permanent racial barriers to citizenship. But they were also explicitly trying to exclude certain classes of people, not based on race, but based on their lack of total, complete political allegiance to the United States that didn't put them in anywhere near similar footing to those newly freed slaves who owe their allegiance nowhere else.
But Amy, I want to get on to another case on the legal point of this, and I know you're aware of it because you allude to it in one of the pieces that I read.
So Amy makes an interesting point because she's saying when Congress was pushing this amendment, what they were actually trying to do is, because of the Dred Scott decision, what they were actually trying to do is they were trying to make the African American citizens that were in the country citizens. Now, for those of you who don't know what the Dred Scott decision is, Dred Scott was a slave who later on tried to take, I believe, well, not his master, but he went to court to sue for his freedom. And he did that because he did it on the basis of living in a free state with his master and he hadn't been a slave. So he was basically saying, like, I should be free set on those bases. The ruling came back from the Supreme Court that he was actually not able to sue because African Americans were not considered, or Africans at the time, they were saying were not considered citizens of the country. So this actually was basically, you can say this was basically the fuel to the fire that aided to the Civil War, really like outbreaking and going nuts pretty much. So because of that whole thing with Dred Scott, Amy's saying that's why Congress was pushing so hard for the citizenship for African American. She's saying that they were interested in not allowing people to become citizens, but it wasn't on the basis of race. It was actually on the basis of no allegiance to the United States, which that would make sense. When we see mass amounts of immigrants coming into the United States, the question therein lies, how many of these people are actually willing to give an allegiance to the United States? Are they just here for money? Are they just here for just a better life? Or do they love this country? Do they want to become an American? Do they want to be a part of this country?
Which you wrote. An 1898 Supreme Court case, which I'm sure our audience will be delighted to plunge into, but it's the US versus Wong Kim Ark. And to explain that briefly, this is about a 21-year-old person who had been born in San Francisco to Chinese immigrant parents. And his parents at the time, by virtue of being Chinese, there were a lot of restrictionist laws and they could not become citizens. He left the country and was not allowed back in because they said he wasn't a citizen. And he took that case to the Supreme Court. Now, before I go on to describe the judgment, is that basically an accurate summation of the underlying case?
Yeah, that is exactly what happened to Wong Kim Ark, yes.
So then, when it comes to the Supreme Court, they rule in his favour by a 6-2 majority. And Justice Horace Gray, for the majority, writes that the case, and I quote, affirms the ancient and fundamental rule of citizenship by birth within the territory. And he then goes on to say that the 14th Amendment is declaratory in form and enabling and extending in effect. So, I mean, that seems pretty clear to me. You obviously don't think that that applies in this case, but the language seems fairly clear. So what is your argument to counter that?
So if that were the only language in that opinion, I'd probably agree with you. But the reality is that opinion doesn't actually follow in its own practice what the common law analysis would have been. So at common law, that analysis from that court would have been very simple. It would have been Wong Kim Ark was born here. He is not the child of an ambassador or any sort of legally accredited foreign national. Therefore, he is a citizen. Instead, the court very narrowly holds and repeatedly emphasizes the lawful permanent residency of Wong Kim Ark's parents. That is irrelevant to anything under the Old English common law. And so actually my thesis within the article that you mentioned is that what the court is doing is sort of recognizing an Americanized version of that common law. And I think to that extent, that limited holding that the US born children of permanently domiciled, lawfully present aliens, what we today consider lawful permanent residents, that they are U.S. citizens, I think that's perfectly consistent with, one, what the original public meaning of the 14th Amendment was, but also with this idea, this Americanized jus soli, this Americanized birthright citizenship, which is not nearly as broad as the Old English Common Law. And you see this even in a Yale Law Review article from that same year commenting on this case, where it recognizes that unlike the Old English Common Law, where even being a temporary sojourner was enough for the child of that person to be considered a citizen of that nation, the American common law doesn't allow for that. That permanent domicile, permanent residency is what makes that US-born child a citizen. And so even after this case, you see scholars understanding that whatever the court is doing here, it is not embracing the full extent of English common law. To the extent it is embracing common law, it is an Americanized version of that. And I think that's perfectly consistent with both the Civil Rights Act of 1866 and also the original public meaning of the 14th Amendment.
So this executive order is going to get litigated. Immigration rights groups are suing to stop it. What would end up being the legal status of, so would this would render as not citizens anymore people, would this be backward as well as going forward?
So my understanding of the executive order is that it is only prospective. And I think that's a good thing, legally speaking. I think if you start looking at stripping citizenship from people who have already relied on that, who the United States has already said in good faith, we're considering you citizens, you start running into reliance issues. But this only looks prospectively for children born after a certain date. I believe that date is the end of February of this year. So it is prospective. The legal status would be after that the U.S. would not consider those children to be U.S. citizens. That said, almost never would that leave a child stateless. I know that this is an argument that has been put forward by critics of this executive order, but the reality is that almost always you are going to have that child either automatically qualify for or have automatically bestowed on them the citizenship of the nation of origin of their parents. In fact, I've not seen yet presented a single instance in which that wouldn't be the case, where you could, by some technicality of law and the fact of birth on U.S. soil, have an individual who just acquires citizenship nowhere if we don't consider them U.S. citizens. So I'm not sure that criticism is actually something that could even plausibly come to fruition.
Thank you so much for joining us today to discuss. We really appreciate it.
So working backwards from what Amy Swar was saying, from the last thing she said, there wouldn't be a case where a child was born after, I believe she said, the cutoff date, where they would not consider these children citizens of the United States would be the end of February this year. So the end of February 2025. She said there wouldn't be a case. She hasn't seen where there would be a case where a child could be born here, but they just acquire citizenship nowhere. She also stated that there could also be a case where if the United States did not consider that child a citizen, that they could acquire automatic citizenship from the birthplace of their parents. This is all interesting to see how it plays out. Going a little bit further back, she talked about an Americanized common law. Do you guys agree with that? To an extent, if we go back to what it was actually created for, and we think about the civil rights movement, and we think about why it was created to begin with, she made a good point. She said there was a time where even just the foreign person being a sojourner, that would be good enough, or someone here maybe seeking asylum only, that would be good enough for the children to become citizens. And now it's not. And she's saying because it's not, that's an Americanized version of the 14th Amendment. She's like, that's much more an Americanized version of the common law. It wasn't actually meant to be that way. These people that are born here, they actually have the right to be citizens, and if they are not, hopefully they can acquire citizenship in the country, the birth of origin of their parents, or maybe something will be worked out because the child would just not have citizenship anywhere. I mean, honestly, when me and my wife kind of talked about this, it sounds kind of messed up. It really does, to think that you were actually born there, and it's like the country's like, yeah, we don't want you, you know, so you go back. And maybe it doesn't have to be taken like that. Maybe it doesn't have to be. You know, this is an extreme situation as far as the United States is concerned with immigration, and we have the last administration to thank for that. But I'm curious to know, what do you guys think about this? You know, I really don't think it's the fault of the child, you know, but at the same time, I get it when, you know, we saw it all over when President Trump was when he was being, like, when RNC rallies and things like that, in the comments, you know, you would see people saying things like, we don't care about your children, they're your responsibilities, it's your fault if anything happens to them, you know, you should have known better, you know. And there is, to an extent, some truth to that. And then on the other side, someone could say, that's really, really cool. You know, the children were born here. So even if their parents don't get a chance to be citizens, what about the fact that, what about their birthright citizenship? So I am dying to know what you guys think about this one. What do you guys think about the fact that there is a chance that if a child is born after February of this year, that they will not have birthright citizenship? That this is a possibility. President Trump is going to do this if he hasn't already signed an executive order for it. I know he signed a lot day 1 and day 2. But yeah, I'm dying to know what you guys think about this. So light up that comment section, guys. Blow it up. Tell me, what do you guys think about this birthright citizenship, 14th Amendment? Where do we stand? Do we love this? Do we hate this? Babies after February, are they out of here? Like, where do we stand with this? You know, some of us are conservative, some of us are liberal, some of us lean conservative, some of us lean liberal, some of us are liberal with a pinch of conservative, conservative with a pinch of liberal. So wherever you land, I'm just curious to know, what do you think about this particular topic? Thank you guys so much for stopping by and hanging around on the corner with me. It's always real, guys. So until next time, be peaceful, take care of yourselves, love one another. Peace.